An up and down last two games for the Florida Panthers, which had the Panthers go to the box plenty of times, had the team not satisfied on Thursday night despite securing a playoff spot. They respond on Saturday with a comeback win, but there's no time to waste because the playoffs begin tonight.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, April 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back after not having a show on Friday due to having a spring break / Easter staycation in the area. Did not go anywhere, stayed in the area, but the focus was not working throughout the weekend. But here we are to talk about both games that happened over the last few days. But for the Panthers, when it comes to just the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of the season, as fans, when you think about them clinching a playoff spot, after the game, team not satisfied, the Paul Maurice saying it's free effing quote day for anyone, and crazy how much Twitter carried that on as far as like the made up narratives as far as that, which you could get a good laugh at it after that kind of quote. But when you think about the tone of voice that Paul Maurice had, that is a sign of a man that's not happy. He said that he's grumpy. He doesn't want to talk about securing the playoff spot too, and for good reason, because when you think about how the game went against the New York Islanders, I mean, 14 shots to the first 40 minutes and then 15 in the last. But at the same time, when the Panthers, they are going to the box quite too often, and we've seen over the last 4 games where it's been 21 times that they've gone to the box, 17 kills on 21 attempts on the PK. But still, you're going to the box far too often. You're not getting your offensive zone time necessary to generate your forecheck and get to the net front, which the Panthers didn't really do much on Thursday against the New York Islanders. And really, for New York, we spoke about this a lot, even in our crossover with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. I mean, there's a lot of issues that they have, especially when it comes to PK, whenever it comes to them being last in the league. I mean, the Panthers only got 1 penalty. Yeah, and there's the whole Chris Rooney conversation where he refereed both that game against the New York Islanders and on Saturday's game against the Detroit Red Wings, and then you see 13-2 as far as the penalty disparity too. But even Paul Maurice spoke about how they can't rely on the referees to protect the net front, which the Panthers had really a hard time. I mean, you really think about it. I mean, even with the goal that was overturned, where thankfully Vladimir Tarasenko scored 24 seconds later. I mean, Kulikov had pushed an Islanders player near the crease. Thankfully, there was enough contact for the referees to overturn the call. But still, you are battling for position. Sometimes, as far as that, sometimes the goalie is disrupted there. Thankfully for that, it was overturned. But even on the third one, where OEL pushes Cizikas into Stolarz, and in that same play, Cizikas trips Sam Bennett, which I was annoyed at that goal being allowed, and the fact that you can't review for a trip. It's not a reviewable play, but still, the fact that the Panthers were unable to get to stay out of the box and create the opportunities for themselves against the against the Islanders, you're pretty thankful that these are only the regular season games, because I the way I think about it is over that time, over time in a series, you get kind of versus going through a whole span of weeks and months of not seeing an opponent. You get a feel of more of how their game is, and then you kind of have an opportunity more to set your pace, which the Panthers were unable to do there against New York. So it's an overall just a strange season series when it comes to them, because on paper that Panthers are the better of the two teams. But hey, one great thing that came out of the night was Barkov getting his 700th point on the second period goal with a great backdoor feed by Sam Reinhart. The 7 power plays that the New York Islanders had on Thursday, Panthers killed all 7 of them, which builds some great confidence. The difference between this season and last year was the fact that the Panthers still went to the box a whole bunch of times, and it comes with the style of play for as far as being aggressive, hard hitting, pitting to the boards, and sometimes if the puck breaks free and you're still trying to catch up, that sometimes a stick infraction happens where you get someone under the legs or a hook or something. That is part of their style of play. But the only bad thing about that was, even Paul Maurice spoke about it, how it leaves guys, specifically Barkov and Reinhart, who play in all situations, they're gassed by the time the third period comes. I spoke earlier about the 15 shots, just the amount of times that they had, the amount of shots that they had compared to the first 2 periods. I mean, when it comes to that number, when you're throwing anything at the kitchen sink, you're throwing anything on net, and sometimes that might be muffins at the net too. That Semyon Varlamov had a lot of time there to just get the save, get the necessary whistle, so that he can get his personnel necessary to take a defensive zone draw too. So that is another thing when it comes to just the Panthers and their inability to just create their second chance opportunities and generate that speed, which thankfully for the the Islanders, I mean, it was really some unforced errors when it comes to theirs. I mean, they didn't really allow them to generate much on the cycle in their own zone too. So that's another thing when it comes to just loose pucks and creating some off script things. And that's really what it comes down to. And once again, it's great that the players didn't feel great about clinching a playoff spot despite losing, which, crazy enough, I went to the Marlins game that day against the Pittsburgh Pirates, where that was my first opening day since 2016, which what happened in the same day, the Panthers went into Montreal and they won 4-1. And they clinched the spot they clinched their the top spot in the Atlantic Division. Unfortunately, this time around, they clinched their playoff spot, but it came in a loss. But going back to the whole, going back to this one and how the players felt too, was it shows that even though they clinched the spot, which we knew that was going to happen. I mean, you look at the whole top points for a team that hasn't made the postseason in the Panthers in 2018, you knew that it was bound to happen for them. So it's not really much of celebration when you think of clinching a playoff spot, even a win. It's like, okay, you're in. But, and yeah, I do countdowns, I do magic numbers and all that stuff. But when it comes to how you're looking prior to the postseason, and it's, like I said, a lot of ups and downs for the Panthers. They're getting everyone's best and all. And really what it goes to show that Paul Maurice took a great opportunity, and don't want to get too ahead of myself talking about the Saturday game against Detroit, but he took that great opportunity to be the adult in the room. And we spoke about so many times about how when to just talk to players, and when in a large group whenever they're not playing well, and when to let the players take care of business. And we had that a lot in the last 2 games when it comes to it came to him voicing his displeasure against when it comes to the team. And let's not forget, this is March 29th, which funny enough has happened to be in Toronto, which is the Panthers' opponent tonight. That was the year where he had that tirade on the bench, and that was a perfect time to be the adult in the room. And listening to that quote where he said publicly, "Free effing quote day," that was that message to his players and saying that this isn't acceptable. And I'm not the type of person who thinks you need external noise to be motivated. Motivation has to come from within, and can't question the Panthers' motivation, but you can question some of their attention to detail when it comes to that. And I think when it comes to Paul Maurice being the adult in the room, that is where I believe that he's trying to get his message to when it comes to just being aware of things that go on when it comes to that. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2. We are gonna discuss more of Saturday's game against the Detroit Red Wings, where the Panthers came out with a 3-2 shootout victory. We're gonna discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper, and we are almost through 82 games through the season. And no matter where the Panthers are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy contests. All you have to do is pick studs like Connor McDavid, Alex Ovechkin, Nikita Kucherov, Nathan McKinnon, if they will record more or less their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win a bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8-player stats. You heard me, Cats fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Use code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Back on this second segment here on this April 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. So the Florida Panthers, let's talk about this second game against in the last two over against the Detroit Red Wings, which I happen to be there in person, actually attended as a fan for the first time in almost 2 years, over a year, actually. The last time I went as a fan, and honestly, great crowd, honestly, on Easter weekend, Saturday matinee, for the Panthers. I mean, penalty, but as far as the game goes, penalty frustration continued and little sloppy despite getting a lot of the zone time, and can't argue with some of the penalties, especially the Lundell penalty that led to the Robbie Fabry goal. And honestly, I was a little annoyed with Sam Bennett having to go to the box for defending Nico Mikkola after that interference that David Perron had on him as the Panthers were trying to break it out of their zone and all. And just that was what I was a little annoyed about. But I mean, you think about how the Panthers' top stars came to play. I mean, even the last two games. I mean, going back to the Islander game where Tarasenko had a set play to Barkov, and then as Barkov was trailing him, and then got it back to Tarasenko for the goal against New York. But even in this one, some of the top stars were continuing to just create so many opportunities. Honestly, if there's a player who didn't get on the score sheet that we should really, really appreciate, it's someone like Sam Bennett too, who really continues to protect the middle of the ice and continues to just drive play into the zone too, and which when it comes to the speed and then creating confusion for the opposition. Sam Bennett continues for me to be just a guy who's just underappreciated, and also had a great opportunity in overtime for the winner. But also, this is only like Aaron Ekblad's second game back, and just what a way to come back for him too, for not only creating that goal coming out of the box to Aleksander Barkov that they created on the rush, but which that in that same penalty kill for the Panthers, they didn't allow a shot on goal. But closing some of the passing lanes when the Detroit Red Wings were trying to break it out, especially when the Panthers were shorthanded, which there was almost that opportunity towards the end of the second for Sam Reinhart to get goal number 52, which would have also been his sixth shorthanded goal of the season. But we spoke about how the Islanders didn't really get goals off the cycle, but hey, the Panthers didn't really get goals on the cycle at 5-on-5 neither too. The goal technically came on 5-on-5, the first one for Barkov, which didn't come until around 7 minutes left in the third. But you think about how the Panthers created that off the rush. It wasn't something that was forced. It just happens to be, hey, you get a little bit of a stretch out. Barkov with great awareness for Ekblad just to create that goal. And at the time of that, where they tied the game, it was 34-21 in shots on goal in favor of the Panthers. So we also got to remember that we've seen Alex Lyon at this time of year when it comes to just when you give him a consistent amount of games, we can see how much he can shine. I don't know about an 82 game season as far as getting at least 50 starts too. I'm not even sure what his number of starts is, but because Ville Husso has been hurt. But I mean, for what that as far as the eye test, when it comes to the thin blue line, at least in my opinion, of Detroit, Alex Lyon is saving their bacon a lot this season too. And going back to off the cycle and goals, not getting goals off the cycle and not 5-on-5. I mean, Panthers using that open ice on that second Barkov goal, which you think about it, the ability to get it out, give and go, get it back to Barkov, and while it's checked out of his stick, it goes in. Sometimes you got to count your lucky stars there. And listen, Detroit dealt with their fair share of adversity too, where Dylan Larkin gets hurt in the first shift of the game, comes back too, and then he gets the game tying goal on the power play. Which, think about this: the Florida Panthers didn't give up a single goal at 5-on-5, nor on 3-on-3 in overtime. Which, crazy to think the amount of back and forth with after the Panthers go to the box, which uncharacteristic penalty by Barkov. I mean, it also goes to show how much more aggressive Barkov is. So some people might say, "Oh, Barkov is going to the box more often than he should," but you could see it in another way, as if Barkov is being a lot harder on the puck, and that's kind of what you like out of someone who is more known for his defensive play too. So I don't necessarily see Barkov going to the box as necessarily a bad thing always, but it's just. But when at the same time, when your penalty disparity is 13-2 in the last two, and you are not getting opportunities in your own end as much, even though the Panthers took advantage of their fair share, especially on Saturday. I mean, you gotta love what they can do if they can stay out of the box when the playoffs do start. And I mean, it showed in round one against Boston at 59% on the kill. But the Panthers' ability to adjust and create their turnovers off their forechecking style and like I said earlier, off script plays, that is something for the Panthers where, hey, they survived that round, and hey, look what happened as far as it bringing them to the Stanley Cup final. But hey, for Florida, thankfully their penalty kill is better. So if they do go to the box, they'll be better prepared to start the opening series, whichever that may be, because there's still so many different scenarios as far as who the Panthers could play. I do believe that the number one seed in the East is all but wrapped up, but still that opportunity to just get their game right before They match up against their opponent in round one, and teams are watching too. They see what the Panthers aggressive play, and they know that they could take advantage of them if they could possibly bait them into penalties. But the Panthers are more of that team who, especially post whistle, who bait other teams into penalties more. They are the ones who are really great at just getting under the opponent's skin. So when it comes to matching, when already getting a penalty, and hopefully for them matching it up with 4-on-4 hockey too, with some roughing calls, you're hoping that the Panthers can continue to use that, but you don't want to rely on that neither when it comes to playoff time, because things get tighter in the postseason and all. But thankfully for Florida, the more experienced goaltender got the best of it when it came to the shootout, where Sam Reinhart got the only goal for Florida, while Sergei Bobrovsky went 3-on-3. And once again, a great atmosphere for the Florida Panthers and their fans on a Saturday too. And just couldn't be happier to see that even in this part of the season, that this market still continues to show out. And they got an entertaining game with the Panthers getting 91 shot attempts and a grinded out type of win. And Barkov spoke about how Paul Maurice let him have it in the locker room after the first period. And even after, Paul Maurice was giving credit to his team that was a player's win. So knowing when to step in and when to also say, hey, they went out there and earned it too, and spoke about how that they are better than what the final score indicated, because the penalties disparity once again, and the shot disparity, despite being shorthanded so many times. And yeah, the Detroit Red Wings are still trying to build. They're still fighting for their playoff lives, and the Panthers, they got the opposition's best. Thankfully on Saturday, they got through, and Paul Maurice spoke about how they created their own problems. So even the coach is admitting it too when it comes to that, and not trying to put too much emphasis on the referees. But also, Paul Maurice does not want to get fined. But sometimes his facial expressions from the bench really showed, as we had a TV monitor near where I was sitting as far as that, and it showed Paul Maurice's facial expressions. But at least publicly, he is not putting them under the bus for them. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss more of tonight's game and how big of a swing game it is for the Florida Panthers heading into Toronto. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And the sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Third and final segment here on this Monday, April 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. So, by the way, I want to say a big congratulations to Spencer Knight for having the longest shutout streak in Charlotte Checkers history, with just over 213 minutes of not giving up a single goal in that span. So Spencer Knight is starting to heat up. The goaltending department is looking great for the Panthers, present and future for the Cats too. So great to see that Spencer Knight is also performing well, just like the Florida Panthers are as far as their goaltending department here this season. Can't ask for anything better because, hey, that's one of your number one. How you win is down the middle, great goaltending, great special teams. That's how you win in this league. And definitely present and future is looking great. Also want to congratulate Jack Devine and the University of Denver for heading to the Frozen Four. They will be facing Boston University in St. Paul, Minnesota on April 11th. And then the final will be on April 13th at at the XL Energy Center as well. A couple of 2-1 wins, including a double overtime win over UMass. Unfortunately, Panthers prospect Carter Berger and Western Michigan lost to Michigan State 5-4 in overtime, and Owen Lindmark and Wisconsin dropped their game 3-2 in overtime. So a lot of close calls in the NCAA tournament. I mean, this is one of the most exciting times of the year. I mean, it's April too. So, by the way, I hope you all had a happy Easter too, for those who celebrate. And also, great time in the sports calendar with March Madness, NCAA hockey tournament. The Masters is in a few weeks too, and we're getting ready for the postseason, which the postseason starts on April 20th, which is going to be more exciting. And also, there's been talk about the playoff expansion coming to an end because at least the conversation, because when you think about the quality of play for the teams outside of the playoff picture right now, it's not great hockey when it comes to those teams, about when it comes to just nobody going on a big winning streak to just get that last spot. And yeah, the Stanley Cup playoffs are random, and sometimes the hottest team goes in there and wins it all. But man, the chances of some of the teams, especially in the East, that have an opportunity to make it, if you expand to the playoffs, I mean, the trade deadline also would have less emphasis too. Actually, more emphasis as far as buyers. It might be fool's gold for a lot of those teams who are just on the bubble too. But let's get into this one with the Florida Panthers going into the Scotiabank Arena to face off against the Toronto Maple Leafs. A few injury updates for the Toronto Maple Leafs, which the Florida Panthers haven't seen the Leafs since they lost to them in a shootout back in late November. Let's not forget that Erod shootout attempt that went off the pads of Joseph Woll and then into the net without making a second motion, and that one was disallowed. Panthers thought they had the win, and then Toronto ended up getting the second point there too, which thankfully the Panthers, with them not getting a lot of regulation wins early on in the season, they still own a whole bunch of the tiebreakers over a lot of teams. They own it over Boston, over Toronto. So, but right now the magic number for the Panthers to clinch home ice in round one is at 12. A regulation win for them brings it down to 8. And tonight is your game in hand, with Boston being off and them playing Nashville tomorrow, who the point streak for the Nashville Predators has come to an end, but there is that opportunity for still the Nashville Predators to get their game going. And the Boston Bruins, their schedule's pretty tough coming down the stretch, even though they were able to kill off a 4-minute penalty kill on Saturday night in Washington. But going back to the Leafs, Mitch Marner is still out, and Morgan Riley and Joel Edmondson are day-to-day. According to Luke Fox of Sportsnet, they're going to roll with the same lineup that they had against the Buffalo Sabres from a few nights ago. So Austin Matthews, he's gotten to the 60-goal mark, and he's being fed the puck a lot, over 30 shots in the last 4 games. So the Panthers, they know that they're going to be focusing in on Austin Matthews, as now he has gotten to 60 goals once again. And players who are right there on his tail are obviously Sam Reinhart, and also another player, a very hardworking player in Zach Hyman, former Florida Panthers draft pick. Zach Hyman has worked very hard to get to this point too. So big congratulations to him as far as his accomplishment of from Florida to Toronto, and now what he's doing with Connor McDavid and company in Edmonton. But as far as the Maple Leafs, the Panthers are going in healthy, the Maple Leafs are not. So this is your big opportunity to just get a little bit of a grasp as far as getting that top spot. Mark Giordano has been a scratch here and there, and now he's playing more of a getting back into playing a role, which if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, you're thinking, okay, veteran leadership and guy who can plug and play whenever an injury situation does happen. Panthers have that with their depth, with inserting guys like Akala Pozo here and there. Steven Lawrence, who has been the ultimate professional there for the Panthers as far as his playing time. And we don't hear people complaining once about their playing time with the Panthers. I mean, they know what the goal at hand is for them. And so, like I said, for the Panthers, this is a big opportunity for them, because without Marner, they're missing their best penalty killer too for them. And also for the Leafs, they still don't have even that third spot locked up too for them, with the Tampa Bay Lightning slowly creeping in too. There is that opportunity for even Tampa Bay to get that third spot in the Atlantic. So nothing is set in stone. It could be Florida. It looks like it's going to be some combination of Florida Toronto or Florida Tampa Bay, because like I said, I don't think the Panthers are getting back to the top spot in the NHL. I think the Rangers are well on their way to clinching that top spot too. And Toronto has a game in hand on Florida too. So that game in hand, if that is won, that's a 4-point difference between the two. So how important is this game tonight? I can't I've already explained it. So this is as big of a road game as can be, as this is their last road trip of the season. I mean, today and tomorrow in Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa on Thursday, and then the big showdown in Boston, where that is probably the most important game of the road trip when it comes to just gaining your confidence after not gaining a single win, even though it means more to Boston as the team that lost to Florida in round one. It means more to them than it does Florida. But the Panthers, as far as knowing how their style of play fits with the road, it's important for them to just continue to gain that, to get their road game going too for this one as they visit Toronto, and hopefully for them put no doubt as far as what they're trying to do as far as getting home ice. And because the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're going to see Florida twice, and they're going to see Tampa Bay twice too in the next week and a half too. So it's going to be a gauntlet for everyone. I mean, there's so many different other races going on in the league as far as swing games. I mean, the New York Islanders are playing the Philadelphia Flyers, who just fell out of the third spot too. And the Islanders, yeah, they won in Florida on Thursday, but they lost in Tampa. So I said on our crossover with Gil, they only have one loss that they could afford, and that was already on Saturday. So New York will have to go on a winning streak the rest of the way to have a chance. Philly is falling a little bit, but still they've created enough of a cushion that I believe that they will find a way to still get that final wild card spot. And still, if the Panthers do face against the Philadelphia Flyers, which again unlikely for them in round one, like I said, in a 7-game series, you like it better than going with quite a few gaps between matchups too. And also on the night too, for other great action, Detroit is visiting Tampa Bay, as Detroit is still trying to claw back after getting a point in South Florida, a game where Alex Lyon kept the Detroit Red Wings in it, and also the Pittsburgh Penguins going into New York. But Penguins season is over, but you know what? They could try to play spoiler, and the Panthers are really gonna try are going to get everyone's best, because you have a desperate Montreal team who's just trying to get out of the basement as far as being a top 5 pick, and Ottawa, who was expected to make the postseason this year but have underachieved big time. So it is a big test this whole week for the Panthers, as there are no easy games. And if you ask me, the postseason, it starts tonight. And it's important to just for the Panthers to just continue to just get their game right after a pretty uneventful March as far as the wins come into play, and as far as getting away from their style of game, as far as protecting the net front. So we'll see what happens tonight when the Florida Panthers take on the Maple Leafs. And who knows, the swing that we spoke about in this episode, if it goes in the Panthers' favor, it's going to be a very fun post-game show. But thank you all for listening. Tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we are going to be bringing in Florida Panthers historian Francisco Aporta to recap tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steer Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.